When we had the interventionist come this weekend,
Yeah.
it came up in natural conversation is what gets you sober, what keeps you sober. And that, certainly made me turn inward and look at my personal journey. And I don't know if it were 100% for me when I started my journey of recovery. I had a lot of pressure from my family, from my mom, my sisters. My father just passed away, and I had these thoughts of, and I'm left with a family of girls. I have three sisters, no brothers, my mom, and I have these thoughts of, well, who's going to help provide or who's going to help take care of this family now that my dad's gone? And I better get my shit together. I better start learning the ropes, learning how to make money, and all the things at once as a 23-year-old man. But what started my journey did not necessarily keep me in my journey of recovery. So, I started with the pressure of family, friends, my dad passing away. But I think what kept me there was starting to see the rewards and the benefits of sobriety and having a clearer mind and making better decisions. So just curious, to bounce this off of a therapist and to talk about a lot of the cases that we work with.
Yeah.
Where do we often see that change, or how do we see that change happen?
Yeah. There are several points that you made that made me think about the process of human beings making change. But I think one of the most important things you have to look at is when somebody is in a place of active addiction, they're in a very reactive state. It's a constant, I have an uncomfortable feeling, I need to escape from it, right? And so it's this reactive cycle over and over and over again. And so what happens with a person when they first enter sobriety is usually a reaction. It's a reaction to an intervention, a reaction to an overdose, a family member saying you got to get help. It's a reactive state. It's also a very external thing, like an external motivation. So we call it extrinsic motivation. Like I have to get sober or to go to treatment to be able to still have access to my parents or to money or to have a car. And so it's driven by all these material things. Super common at first. For that to be the main reason somebody would start going to treatment and trying to be sober. I think for somebody to actually have maintaining lasting sobriety, the motivation has to shift to something more meaningful. It gives you an element of dopamine and pursuit, and makes it a richer experience if hey, there are layers to my motivation. And that's not to say that didn't matter for you. The reason you're still sober today is probably because you still care about your mom and your sisters and want to be an active healthy part of the family. But your motivations are much more, I don't know, profound than that. There's more layers to it now.
Yeah.
Right? It's much more internal.
For
And
sure.
so that's what we see is people will shift from being very externally reactive driven at first to this more intrinsic proactive place later on. But it takes time for that. I mean, we're probably looking at a several year long process of that. It's happening slowly and you don't even realize that growth is going on.
I've done a video before saying that feeling the progress wasn't good enough in the beginning. I needed to see it.
Yes.
And that's why I dove into the gym to see physical things changing on my body. Is almost like cutting the grass and seeing that you did it. And,
Yep.
and it looks much better. I needed to see those changes because the feelings weren't coming fast enough. My anxiety, depression, those things weren't subsiding
Yep.
and withering away at the rate that I needed them to
Yeah.
in the beginning. But you're right. I think it started with this reactive thing, and it's still a piece of my sobriety. Now I'm so prideful that I can be there for my family, that I can suit up, show up, that I have awesome relationships with them, which I didn't before. I was just pushing them away when I was in active addiction. But it's a smaller piece of the pie on the chart. If you look at the overall picture of what's keeping David sober today, of being a functioning member of society, David trying to build his own family, David trying to do the next right thing in relationships that I create with people. That, like, at the end of the day, it gives me pride and a sense of self-worth.
Yep. Yeah, I think what's also interesting too is like the ability to take perspective, you know, to like almost step outside yourself and realize like, wow, I've really come a long ways. I've like, you know, built this life. I built these relationships. That is so hard early on because you're so in it. You know, it's that expression, you can't see the forest for the trees. You can't see what you're building. And so like, as you get more wins, you start to stack them up. And you also get older and like your brain is in a healthier place, you're able to have like a little bit better perspective taking, to be able to step back and be like, wow, like I can see like where this journey has been, you know?
Yeah.
But once again, like that takes so much like patience. People will like sometimes think that you're going to get there immediately. Like as soon as you stop using, that you're going to be able to do that. But it takes so much longer. There's so much like emotional and spiritual growth that has to happen, as well as like just physically the brain has to repair itself.
Yeah.
You know, like when people get into active addiction and they're in active addiction, they're very instinctually driven. You know, like those parts of the brain are very lit up in terms of like survival mechanisms. Like it's same parts of the brain of like to control like eating, sleeping, desire for sex, like all these like very primitive instinct. That's what's lit up when somebody's in active use, right? And so that's what you're combating. The parts of the brain that think about relationship and think about logic are not as like active. And so like when someone gets sober, they're able to start considering like relationship. They're starting to be able to consider the logic and like, where is this path going? Where is this progress leading to?
Yeah.
As opposed to just being in this thing like I need to eat, sleep, have sex, get drugs. Like, and what happens is even like drinking and doing drugs, like that overrides the need for eating, sleeping, having relationships. It overrides all that. So it just takes a while for that reset to happen. You
Yeah.
know? That makes sense.
Oh, for sure. I mean, even as you're mentioning that, I'm thinking through like when you took the drugs out of the picture and I went into treatment for the first time, my sugar intake picked up, and I'm like munching on Reese's Pieces all day, every day, and my caffeine intake, my nicotine intake. Like, if you looked at me in my first week, 2 week, even longer, first few months of treatment, I was still a mess of just like, I would go from a cigarette to a cup of coffee to a bag of Reese's to like anything to make that part of the brain fire off the way that it was when I was on drugs or alcohol. And I could never get there. Like the high was never going to be as high as it was when I was taking Oxycontin or Xanax, whatever it may be. But I was going to try my damnedest to get there and white knuckle it through those hard times. And that slowly started to taper off to where I'm having healthier behaviors. I'm going to the gym more. My sleep schedule is dialed in a little better. I'm putting better things in my body in terms of food and drink, and not chugging coffee all day, every day. But it was a mess in the beginning.
What's interesting is that I even think about like knowing you super well and like the phases of your recovery. The longer you're sober, the quicker you can catch yourself when you're in the next compulsive cycle, right? Like, and so what you'll see for people is they'll stop drinking, doing drugs, but they jump into another compulsive cycle. It's usually like, nicotine and caffeine. You know, that's what they talk about. Like even at meetings, it's the cigarettes and the coffee, you know, that's like, but there's also connection happening. It's a lot better. It's a step along the way of progress. But then it'll go to exercising. It'll go to relationships. It'll go to spending money, porn, gambling. I mean, it's all these like various things that most people will try to still get that like same high. But if you're being humble and if you're around people that you have like really good connections with who can call you out on it, or that you feel safe opening up to them about like your struggles, you'll see that cycle will not go as long. It won't be as long as like 10 years of using or 20 years of using. It'll be a shorter cycle.
For sure.
And that's just a part of life. It's just like an ever evolving process of like, there's going to be workaholism. There's going to be like, you know, all these things that are going to come up, and the person has to be able to recognize, even though I'm sober, I also have to be humble enough to catch myself if I'm in that next like compulsive cycle,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
just part of the process, and it's not necessarily always a bad thing. Sometimes there's really great stuff that can come out of those cycles. But being able to like catch it quicker. One other super important thing is having structure with it. So even if, as a person that I have this like compulsive thing, right, that I do, if I have that, can I still have structure on the side, and that may be in form of meetings or going to therapy, or like I spend time with these friends and family, like these structures, and I'm still showing up for those. That's going to keep people in a pretty healthy state. Because if
Yeah.
you think about what happens in addiction, all that goes away. Like there isn't really routine and structures outside of like getting drugs, doing drugs, and then trying to get them again.
Yeah.
Same with like drinking, finding alcohol, drinking alcohol, finding it again. That's the only like structure. So if you have like a schedule, a routine that's I would say pretty like balanced and diversified, that can help with some of those compulsive cycles that people can get caught up in.
I would say priorities.
Yes,
It's a
exactly,
Key
yeah.
to that is like,
Yeah.
how are you prioritizing the things that need to happen? Because when I'll go back to my personal story, like when I'm drinking, when I'm using drugs, like that is priority numero uno.
Yep.
And work, relationships, everything else that maybe should be higher on the priority list is put way off to the side.
Yeah.
But to where now, even when I do get in these cycles, because they happen for me, I still check myself on that structure and on the priorities and say, hey, did I do the things that I needed to do for work or for my wife or for my mom? Or, I go through those boxes, and then, maybe I strike out and play pickleball for 4 hours at a time.
Yeah.
But then that's where it's good to recognize it and talk about it with your friends, so they can call me on things, and they might say, when I'm complaining about my lower back hurting, like, dude, David, maybe you don't need to play pickleball for 4 hours a day
Yep.
every day of the week. And I have to recognize, okay, maybe I just can't do that anymore.
Yep.
Maybe I'm not, my body's not built like it was when it was 16, and I need to taper it down to, I can play for 2 hours, 3 days a week, or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. But
Awareness in that moment leads to humility.
yes,
You know what I mean? Like that should kind of always be a constant. I think that like having self-awareness, I hate to use the word should, but it should equal, humility.
yeah,
And if it's not, if your equation isn't, you're self-aware and it's not equaling humility, huge red flag. Need to really like figure out what's going on there and
Yeah.
like hash that out with somebody, but if I'm self-aware, like, wow, I'm playing pickleball for 4 hours and I had this information from my body that my lower back hurts, then that should equal maybe I shouldn't be doing it. Maybe I'm getting too old for that.
yeah,
Maybe there's just too many other things going on, like
yeah,
leading to humility.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing to feel, but it also like super important, it's really
absolutely,
vital.
yeah. How do we help families navigate that and make them aware of how this cycle may change throughout the recovery journey?
Yeah. I think for the families, it's super important for like helping them to practice patience, and to help with some of the anxiety that can come up to like my child or family members, like his recovery or their recovery doesn't look how I would have expected it to look, and to realize like, okay, the way I thought it was going to go, like that's maybe not how it's going to be, and to have like patience with that. I mean, newsflash, I feel like most every parent can agree with that just having a kid from day one, it usually doesn't go the way you anticipate. And I know that like firsthand.
Yeah,
So I think for them to understand that, it is a messy process, even when they're sober, but that's actually a good thing on some weird level, because recovery is not boring. So people sometimes when they come in, they're resistant, like, oh, it's gonna be so boring, like I can't, go party anymore or whatever. I'm like, if you're paying attention, it's not boring at all. I mean, even in this conversation alone, we're talking about people smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee, gambling, working all the time,
Yeah.
playing crazy amounts of pickleball, and like figuring out like how to catch themselves, how to have conversations with people, how to like find that next place for self-improvement. Not boring at all.
Yeah.
And so I think that's actually like a really like encouraging thing that you almost have to experience it to feel it and to know it. But I think that's also a message that families can give to their loved one who's struggling. Like, hey, I assure you, it is not going to be boring.
Yeah.
It's going to be different, but it's not going to be boring.
And it may not happen on the time frame that you think it is. That's one of the
Yes.
biggest things I see is this expectancy on time and how soon this massive change should happen. And a lot of families thinking, and maybe we've kind of trained people to think that way with when you look at the majority of treatment out there
Yeah.
today, it's like, go to this 30-day treatment or go to this 60-day treatment. And that's not enough time for a real change to happen. But I think a lot of the families that we work with, they're like, surely in 30 days, it's going to be rainbows and sunny
wish.
days. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it just logically, it didn't start in 30 days. Why would it end in 30 days?
Yeah.
You know, and so when you look at people's timeline and like when the when the abuse of the substances actually started, it was usually preceded by other stuff, you know, other loss or, maybe like from losing a person, losing a direction in life, losing a purpose. There's usually some kind of loss that precedes to substance abuse. And this did not happen like in one day. This happened usually over the course of years. So it's just unreasonable to expect like the recovery process to also happen that quickly in days. People
Yeah.
feel better, you know, they'll definitely feel better, but it is just a constant up and down. And it's interesting too that just like there's stages of addiction and like degrees of chemical dependency, it's the same thing with recovery. There are stages of recovery.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to always just be boom right into action and just taking off. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs, and that's just being a human, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big wake-up call for me in treatment. I think it was a therapist or maybe a mentor that brought that to my attention when I was like, oh, I just feel so bad all the time. I hate this. I'm miserable. And they're like, David, you just spent how many years in active addiction and using and running from your emotions and your fears? And I was like, like 10 years. You know, it started early for me, like 13.
Yeah.
Probably before that with other things, but with nicotine and marijuana, that started at 13 years old. It's like, okay, well, if you spent the last 10 years and imagine yourself like you're getting into the woods for 10 years, you expect to find the road again in 10 days? Like, that's crazy. Who gave you information like that? And I was like, my brain did, you know, I thought that I should feel better automatically. Most people, most families fall into that same thinking of, no, I need to feel better, and this change needs to happen now.
Yep. Yeah. Good news is it usually doesn't take as long to get out of the woods as it took you to get into the woods.
Yes. Yeah.
In my experience, just from watching people over the years.
Yeah. It's crazy how fast changes can happen. It just may not be in the first 10 days or the first month or 2 months.
Yeah.
But
Oh, actually, that's interesting. So the idea of, you know, if it took me 10 years to get into these woods, you know, it's not going to take me 10 minutes to get out of them. I'd actually maybe change that a little bit to what happens is it takes you 10 years to get into the woods, and then you're never actually going to get out of that forest. You're just going to get to safer parts of the forest.
yes.
And so you're never like, you know, the desire to escape the woods is what the addiction was trying to do. Acceptance is realizing I'm never leaving this forest, this forest of life in this metaphor. I'm just going to a safer part of the woods. You know,
or find a nice path.
finding a nice path.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like a safer part where there's meadows and nice path and like, not creatures.
Some pretty
trying
views
to,
along the way.
For sure. But you're never getting out of the woods.
Yeah.
You know, and honestly, you've already been on that trail before, so why go back? It's actually like a good thing.
Yeah.
But I think there's sometimes that's the other idea that like things should just be smooth once I'm sober,
Yes.
and it's just not. You
Yeah.
know, there's still a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah. Life still happens for everyone.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
That's a good one. The reality is when I came in, I had zero self-worth. I had zero pride. You know, I was lost in this crazy world that has been built today. And when I decided that I wanted to be sober and that this was David's choice, I want to do this for me, I want to keep on this path, was when my pride was built back up. I felt that I felt worthy of people's time, and that I had something to give to other people. And I felt that I could contribute. I felt that I could learn the world and the way that it works out there, and that I didn't have to live in fear of it, and that there was a place for me out there.
Yeah.
That's when I decided I want to stay sober.
Yeah.
And I see that through and through with all the guys that we work with, all the women that we work with that come into night group. I can't tell you one person that's ever come in for like a pre-admission screening or for their initial assessment and they were just like super prideful, had all this money in the bank with self-worth, spiritual bank was full to the brim. Like those things are always depleted. And we have to figure out how to build those back up. And that's an extremely hard thing to do when you're in active addiction, because it's just robbing you of whatever money you're putting in that spiritual bank or pride bank or self-worth bank.
Yeah, it's this idea like of the reasons that get you sober are not going to keep you sober, because they're two different things. Getting sober is different from staying sober, and they have to have different motivations. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so the motivation to cause someone to step through the door are going to have to be amplified for that person to stay and do the work. Because we're talking about two different things. Getting sober is not the same as staying sober.
Yeah.
So of course there's different reasons for that. The reasons have to morph and evolve. And I would argue that the motivations of staying sober are essentially just, they've just been added on to the original motivation to get sober. So I come in with, this is where like my motivation is to get sober because of people telling me that I need to. To stay sober, it has to be added on to.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think that kind of bleeds into another topic we were talking about, or spitballing about, talking through, which is one of the biggest lies I think is out there, is when people say they have to want it, or they have to pick this way of life to really get it. They have to want treatment. And that's not the case. Like,
No.
I was forced into it to a degree. I mean, I asked to go to treatment, but my first day there, I was like, no, I hate this. Come get me. This is hard and it sucks.
Yep.
I want to go back to my old way of life of numbing out and running from my fears. And I had to be pushed. Like, people held me accountable. They put their foot down and said, no, we're not coming to get you. You're crazy. Get better.
Yeah. So even like from a therapist standpoint, I hear that from therapists sometimes, of like they just don't want it, or I'm not going to do more work than they do, talking about the clients. And I just think that's complete bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, so if somebody comes in, let's flip it for a second. If somebody comes in and they're a cancer patient, are you expecting them, if you're the oncologist, are you expecting them to be able to have the same knowledge, energy, and effort as you do when they're ill? And it's like day one of chemo.
Yeah, it's
That
wild
makes
to
no
think
sense at all.
Yeah.
Right? Do I think the person eventually has to take more ownership? Absolutely. But it's an unrealistic expectation, and it's completely unfair to expect them to meet you halfway. Our job as helpers is to go help, not to just sit and say, hey, come to me.
Yeah.
So like, it's just a ridiculous thought that I don't agree with at all. It's like, you need to go help. And then there be ongoing conversations about this. These are the limits of my help. I cannot do it all for you, but I can do these things. And that's just showing like clear communication and what it looks like to have a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
But it's just super unfair
Yeah.
to expect somebody to come in and to meet you halfway
Yeah.
at the beginning. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And that goes back to the age-old saying of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink.
Right.
But in the very beginning, it's almost like, well, I'm going to scoop some water up and throw it up to your face,
Yes.
so you know that it's here.
Yes.
You know, I'm going to go beyond just leading you to water. Mm-hmm. You know, I'll get bucketfuls and dump it over you
Yeah.
until you like put your head down and take a drink. But
Yeah.
I hear the same thing. What you just mentioned of therapists or whoever saying, "Oh, I'm not going to work harder than they are willing to do. I'm out if it looks like that." So,
Yeah. I mean, for a baby, if a baby like started to walk and they fell, you'd be like, Psh, they don't want it enough.
Yeah.
And then just walk away from the baby. No, you would like grab their hand. You would try to help them take little steps, and you would do that over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. Addiction has such a stigma on it that people don't see it the same way. You know, there's so many hurt feelings, and there's so many things that come out of addiction that cause people to have more of a wall up and to be more of like, they just got to figure it out. And I understand that on some level. But as a helper, our job is to be there to help grab them by the hands and help them stand up and practice walking.
Yeah, over and over and over again.
And over and over again. And then say, hey, you can do this, and let go. Mm-hmm. And they're going to fall on their butts. And then you have to help them back up. Like, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's just not fair to expect them to meet you day one halfway. You know, that's just not fair at all.
No, I totally agree. And that's interesting, and I'm trying to gain my thoughts around it. But there's an interesting piece there of, especially if you look at it in terms of enabling versus helping. And I think the reason a lot of people would be quick to drop off is because they think that, well, they should be capable. This is a 25-year-old adult we're talking about. They should be capable of drinking the water. I just showed them the water, drink it. It's not a tangible thing. It's tough to see if they need more help, or am I enabling if I get the buckets of water and dump it over them and show them that, like, no, water's here, come here, get some more, you can drink it, I promise, it's good.
Yep.
But addiction takes such a toll on us and makes us delusional around recognizing some of the benefits of sobriety and or seeing what a healthy life could look like, that we do need more than just taking us to the water.
Yes, exactly. And if you never lived it, like if you as a parent or a family member have never struggled with addiction, then you really don't know what that's like.
Yeah.
You're just comparing it to your own normie experience. Mm-hmm. Right? And so that's just not fair.
Yeah.
You know, it's just two different people, two different experiences. The other thing I see that's just super interesting is people who actually have struggled with substances, but then they will say, well, I just put it down. Or, you know, I walked into a meeting and I knew I just couldn't do it anymore. And I just want to say, like, out of all the years of doing this, I just want to be like, that's kind of bullshit. You're not mentioning the other, like, 17 times, you know, you woke up, like, hungover as hell, or, you know, your girlfriend broke up with you, or you had all these moments that were showing up to say, like, hey, you have a problem. You know, it's almost like this past glorification and disconnect from one's past, you know, to remember how hard it was in those early days.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think it's, you know, you have to, like, kind of, as a person, like, look at the person who's early in recovery and they're really trying to figure out and they need help, and almost put your own experiences just to the side and say, like, it's clear, like, this person is having a hard time. Here's the water on the face.
Yeah.
You know, like, here is a little extra help.
Yeah.
And then just doing that over and over again until they can figure it out on their own, you know?
I want to go back just a second there because we brushed over something.
Sure.
And it was another topic that came up on Friday when we were hanging out with an interventionist and case management guy. And he said something that I thought was spot on and beautiful. But he said, you know, there are people out there that work with addiction who never experienced addiction. They just went to school, and those people, they got to get the answers, and then take the test
Yeah.
and got their degree. And then you have people that help in this field who actually struggled with addiction. Like I'm one of those people. And we're case in point this.
Yep.
Like you went to school to become a therapist, you got all of the answers in school, then you got to take the test, you passed, you got a degree. I felt out of school. I got removed from school because drugs had like completely destroyed my life.
Yeah.
I had to take the test with addiction and learn the hard way, and then I got the answers. And then I got to figure out how to navigate this life of recovery.
Yep.
And I just want to bring that up again, or bring it to the front of mind here, because I think it's so important when you're working with addiction to have both sides.
Yeah.
To have the person who got the answers and took the test, and to have the person who took the test and then got the answers. And when you have those working together on a team, within a treatment or intervention cases or whatever, within therapy, that's a good team.
Yeah.
I think that that's more of like the all-star group versus when you're just trying one.
Absolutely, because both perspectives are going to have blind spots.
Yeah.
And the hope there is there's enough like self-reflection and accountability within the team to be able to help point out the blind spots. You know, I absolutely agree. Something I told the group last week, it was a couple of new guys, and we were just kind of telling us a little bit about ourselves, and I was sharing about me. And I said, you know, I'm like a normie. You know, I didn't struggle with addiction. And I'm lucky I haven't had much personal experience with addiction. I've had a ton of experience with recovery, and I know recovery because I've been doing it for close to 15 years now. You know, and like a lot of like what I encourage people to do is like what I do in my own life. You know what I mean? On the recovery side of it. So, you know, I think there's elements there, going back to the oncology. Would you want only doctors that have had cancer? You know, would you only want your oncologist to have had cancer or to have been studied in it? But then you probably also would love sitting there next to somebody who's also getting chemo, who's like walked the steps and like gets it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like really gets it. I think that's super important too.
Yeah.
You
You
know?
want both pieces of that in your
Yes.
recovery journey.
Absolutely.
And just to touch on my personal experience one more time, you know, I can remember going to talk with my therapist, early days in treatment, and him
Yeah.
pulling me out, and I was having a one-on-one session with him, and he was giving me really good tools that I still use today because they were great tools to use. But there was always this thought in my head, or this component of, yeah, but you don't get me.
Yeah.
You'll never get me. You never walked a mile in my shoes. Like, you've never struggled with addiction, so you don't know the struggle that I'm going through. And then I would go to the other person that was in treatment with me, and there was one guy in particular who was like in his 40s, and I'm 23 years old. But for some reason, I gravitated toward this guy, and there was a comfort there, a level of comfort and peace of talking with this guy because he got me. I know that he knew my struggle. He had a little more time of sobriety than I did, and I felt like it was a different layer of trust, I guess.
Yeah.
But then it was much needed that I had to have both of those components. This
Yep.
therapist over here giving me some of his tools, and this person in recovery and the lived experience giving me some of their tools to put in my belt,
For sure.
you know?
Yeah. I think there's also the element you can't bullshit a bullshitter.
Yeah.
You know, like I can't go into a group and act like I've lived this hard life. 'Cause it could be obvious pretty quickly that like that's not true at all.
Yeah.
But like people, I think, gravitate towards genuineness. You know, even if they're like, you know, trying to find every reason not to like the person or connect with a person.
Yeah.
You know, and it can be a lose-lose, right? Let's say I was in recovery as a therapist, and I'm like, yeah, guys, I'm like 10 years sober. You know, if you're resistant sitting there hearing me say that, you're thinking, this therapist was a junkie too. I'm not listening to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not listening. He struggled with drugs too. I'm not listening to him. Or it's like, no, I didn't struggle with addiction, you know, but I know recovery. He doesn't get me. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't walk in my shoes. It cuts both ways when you have somebody who's like resistant. This goes back to the other thought. Like, you can't expect someone to just walk in and trust everyone when they have a hard time trusting themselves.
Yeah.
You know, like you have to realize that and just show up and be genuine, kind, empathetic, and like try to help them get like some of the connection that they need. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh yeah.
And like a big part of it is just being like real
Yeah.
and authentic, you know,
Yeah.
and
like
your
I
heart
said,
being in the right place.